I'm now working on the door panel for the clock, and I thought I'd go over some basic things with you guys. So I decided on tenons, mortise and tenon joints instead of a 45-degree angle across here, because one, we have a wider piece, and so cutting a 45-degree angle in here is a little bit more difficult to figure out. So easier to figure out with a mortise and tenon. So what I've done is I've marked the width of each of these rails on the top and the bottom. You can see the markings here, the bottom rail being narrower than the top rail. And so that gives me a stopping place, and I've on my router I've marked off 1/8 of an inch just below that final point, so I can work that rest of that with a chisel just in case I get too far past my router bit. And the other thing I've done here is I wanted to know which side is up and also which is the inside edge, because this will go against the face every time, although I'm just selecting this as going against the face of the fence. It could be the other way as long as you're consistent. So I made those marks there to show the beginning of the cut and the end of the cut of my router bit, so that I can take my panels or stiles, run them all the way through then until I get to the front cutting edge. As you can see, there's where my mark is. So I will stop, pull it back out. Now, if you notice, I'm going into the cutter bit on this side, but in order to keep the face and the inside edge down, I have to, on this side, I have to plunge. So the way you'd make a plunge cut is I would take my mark, plunge down on my rail, down into the router bit, and you could be a little bit offset if you wanted to just to be safe, and then work your way up to the line. Work your way up to the line, and then once it's in, you pull it out this way. So I did want to go over those operations with you, and again, notice that my marks here. Notice my marks here. I want this edge down, and this is the face, so I want this toward the fence every time. So I am consistent with my cuts. All right. Hope that was clear. One thing I wanted to mention was that I've got my final height here 3/8 of an inch, which I believe will give me enough strength on this tenon and not be too destructive of the sides. But I didn't make my first cut at 3/8 of an inch. I made about 1/8 of an inch and kept working up till I got to probably even a 1/16, and worked my way up to 3/8. The face of the clock is going to sit on where the outline is here. This actually will be the stem that comes out of the working mechanism. The face sits on this, and I've already cut this to be the diameter of the face of the clock. And so the problem is for the door, this is the top part of the door, where do I make this arc cut here? And so in order to get this aligned properly, I know that these shoulders right here are in alignment with the center line of the diameter of the face here. And so all I did was use 2 squares then to push up against that edge, and I cut this template piece to be the exact width of this top door piece. And so by finding the center line here and center line on my cut, on my template, I now can just make this arch. So I cut this arch using the router. I went over that in another portion of the video. But in this case, I had to measure from this diameter here, or the center of the circle, to the outside edge of the router bit. If you recall before, I used the center of the circle to the inside of the router bit because I wanted to make this cut, which is the part I'm keeping is on the inside. This part I'm keeping is on the outside. So I have to measure from the outside of the router bit to make this cut. Now I'll just attach this to the top rail piece here with the carpet tape. I will cut all of this out with a bandsaw, or you could even use a handsaw to cut down close to your line. You could then take a chisel and chisel this out, or just get close to your line and then use a template cutting router bit to rub along this edge right here and make that a nice flush cut. And so when we put the face on the clock, this will be on the outside of the edge of the clock face. I'm set up now to go ahead and cut that cord on the upper rail of the door. So I have this is a pattern cutting bit, has the the bearing on the bottom, and it's going to go in, it's going to ride along the template that I cut out with my little Colt router. So it's going to ride along and cut this arch here. One of the things that I will have an issue with is when this thing comes around to the back side here, and this is in particular a cherry and walnut too, or just about any of them. When that bit is spinning in this direction, there's a good chance it's going to take this last piece and knock that off. So I'm going to take my small chisel, and pare that down as much as I can to minimize the amount of material it's taken off. I took this over to the bandsaw and I sawed down just above the line, so there's very little that's going to be taken out up against the template. You could do that with a handsaw, and actually you could actually then take a hand chisel, and you could chisel away down to that line or get very close to it, and then take a hand plane and plane it all the way down to the line and get pretty good results. I just made my cut, and actually the results I think turned out pretty well. Didn't have the chip out on the side, and that's always a good thing. It may be a little rough up in here. I can see a spot right there where the grain was starting to break away. But this is going to have some molding on it to be cut with a router bit, so that will either take that away or hide it. So on to the next step then. I decided early on when I was formulating the plans for the clock that inside these edges right here I would have a little piece of molding that would be black, and so it would match the moldings up here. So I ran some experiments on this and came up with this design. I want to go over a couple of things on cutting this this stile here. That's the upper stile for the door. When we first made this arc, what we did was measure from the center point of the clock face to the outside edge. That outside edge, then I added 1/4 of an inch because I want a piece of molding to sit in here that would match the molding that's going to be on the stiles, this being the rail. And so I swung that arc on my little Colt router here, which I really like, and measure that distance, which was 3 1/4 inches, to the, that would be 3 1/4 inches to this edge right here. Now, so 3 1/2 to this edge here then, if I had 1/4 inch. So I measure then on my router where the center of the pin is to the outside edge of the router bit to make this cut right here. If I'd measured to the inside, it would cut too much. So measure to the outside of the bit, swung this arc, and made this template. Then from the template, I was able to go ahead and cut this rail here and with the same arc on it. So now I needed that little molding piece to sit inside a 1/8 inch deep by 1/4 inch wide dado. I'm going to call it a dado. That may not be the right term, because that runs around the entire inside of the door. That's all going to be walnut, and it's going to be ebonized to give it a nice contrast between the cherry. So in order to make that molding then, which is the trickiest part, all the rest of it is just going to be flat, straight edges, I had to swing several arcs to get this piece right here. So I was able to take a just a rounded router bit, a 3/8 inch I think it is. It'd been better if it would have been 1/2, because that would have given me 1/4 inch center point of the router bit being right over this. But anyway, I cut this 1/4 inch. So first of all, I had to make my first cut to make this cut right here, which would be at the 3 1/4 inches. Then the 1/4 inch, which I set off over here, so that this edge right here, this front edge of this piece, would be 1/4 inch from this edge. Then I had to go another 1/8 inch on this, then to cut this piece out. So you can add it all together here, but that would be, so this would be the outside edge of my router bit would be set at 3 1/4 here. On this one, the inside of the router bit would be set at 3 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/8, and that would give me this arch. Now, the question was, would this slide in now by running this piece then across my slot cutter, and I set this depth here at 1/8 inch. So I built this little piece on my router table to just be a rub joint, so I could get my 1/8 inch on that rounded arc right there. So I made that 1/8 inch deep, and this should fit right in it. So I just put the piece in the little dado there. It fits up quite nicely inside there. So I have a nice molded edge that I'm going to ebonize. And by the way, this is a 1/4 inch showing here. So I will lay the glass of the door, I'll lay it up against that and tack that in with some flat molding. Anyway, I hope that was clear about how to get all of those rounded edges. And that's really going to make this little project pop out.